So let's, I'm going to just go ahead and start. So anyway, I love the subject matter and oftentimes I'm asked why. And I have to go back to the 1960s when I was a kid and growing up here in the LA area. Uh, all of us boys seem to have a stack of Marvel comics or DC comics. In other words, we knew all the superheroes, Captain America, all of that. And being a boy, kind of like, I don't mean to sound sexist or anything, but a lot of times the girls were playing with horses and, unicorns and things like that. And the boys were playing with action figures. It's just one of those things, trucks or dolls kind of a thing. And I've oftentimes wondered, what that's all about. If it's something that we're born with or something that was kind of projected on us and pushed on us, or if it's something that's just in our nature, that us boys just want to kind of build things or make things or whatever. The good thing is that everything has become a little bit more of a crossover. Like there's a lot of women in car design, and there's a lot of guys, designing dolls, that kind of thing. But in the 1960s, before, and I know this is going to be hard for some of you to kind of fathom, but we didn't have any devices. So our devices were our imaginations. We had to activate those soldiers because they were plastic. They didn't move. So you had to kind of bounce them around. We had to create things out of our heads. So even if you weren't an artist, you were an artist because you had to kind of create from nothing. And that's something that I think is lost nowadays. And it's unfortunate because I really do think that growing up in the time when I did, and even the people before us, before TV and everything, he had even less. So they had things to work with. They would make boats out of like twigs and pieces of wood, and they put them on the stream. The other thing that comes to mind besides Marvel Comics is the fact that I came from another country, and is the fact is that it's more common now for people to know at least two languages rather than just one. I know that's something I really haven't looked into, but I get the feeling maybe growing up in Southern California, we have this amalgam of just people from all over. And oftentimes people had to learn English like I did. So anatomy to me is a language. And once again, going back to those days when I was enthralled by Marvel Comics, I wanted to not just read these comic books, but I wanted to kind of draw them and copy them and maybe make superheroes out of my friends. So I seem to be the one that took that role on as the artist of the group. And I think all of us have that in common where at some point in our lives, we were identified as the artist. Oh, this kid is, oh, he's the strongest, he's the fastest, she's the smartest, she's the this, she's the that, he's the this, and he's the that. I became the artist in the classroom. And oftentimes there was like two or three other artists as well. But we start developing an identity. And at the same time, I wasn't a good reader simply because I was from somewhere else and it was hard for me to learn English. So the easiest things for me to read were comic books because they had pictures and they had very, very little text. It wasn't like my daughter reading Harry Potter. It's like I couldn't do that even now. But comic books, I could still read. So I start getting pulled in that direction and I start drawing muscles as I saw them in my head. And it wasn't until I was at Art Center College of Design and my first and only anatomy teacher, Bern Hogarth, kind of opened up this whole new world of it was like the meeting of science and art at the same time. And what was really amazing was his knowledge. I've always been amazed when somebody could talk about, breaking down an engine, and taking it apart, or carburetor, or box making. It doesn't matter what it is. When somebody has a knowledge of something and they speak with it, of it with passion, it's like it pulls you in. And that's what happened with me. Is I started getting this really wonderful pull towards not just drawing these superheroes, but trying to understand what these muscles were, because did understand that when I looked in a mirror and made a muscle, in the mirror, it's like there was something there. And I wanted to know what that was underneath the skin. It was kind of like cloaked, and the cloak was skin. And I started becoming more and more interested in finding out what was under the skin. So I would spend a lot of time in the library, because obviously we didn't have Google or the internet, but encyclopedias. So I started reading encyclopedias from cover to cover and got this broad knowledge of a lot of really interesting, weird stuff. But I would always like the A book because it had anatomy, and it had the plastic overlays that were just so cool to me, where you could kind of flip pages and see what was inside, and the organs, and the liver and the lungs and all that. But what I was most interested were the muscles and the skeletal system. And in Burton Hogarth's class, I remember thinking, I not only love the subject, but I want to get more into it, because one semester in a class isn't going to do it. Just like taking one semester of German, and thinking that you're going to be fluent in German or Hebrew or whatever. It's like, no, it takes a long time. So I start thinking about what I now call conversational drawing, conversational anatomy, conversational anything perspective. It's like where you could just do it without thinking about it. But I did realize that just like language, you can't just learn from the book. You have to really just immerse yourself in it so that you're conversing. You're conversing with other people that know it well, so that you're not speaking as if you're a textbook. You're speaking from the heart. And there's that connection between the way you speak your language and what's in your head, what's in your heart. And that's the poetry of any language. And I start realizing that if I wanted to draw the body well, or of a human or a cat, that I should know what that subject is, and immerse myself in it. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made in my life, because I'd always liked drawing bodies. It just turned out that, like, speaking a language that you don't know well, people that know it well can tell that you don't know the language inside out. So they always kind of like allow you that, but they understand that you're not a master of that language. So I started thinking about me learning English, and then me wanting to learn anatomy, the language of it, so I could just speak it without thinking about it. Because to be honest, the thing that turns most people off is like, oh, I don't want to spend all that time learning this and that. So, well, then you're never going to speak French. You're never going to speak German. You'll know how to, get a hot dog, or ask for where the bus station is or the train station. But that's about it. So you're limited. So if you want to become fluent in anything, just take the time to understand it and learn it until it's internalized, until there's a point when you're not thinking and you're not translating, you're just doing. And that's where you start getting a sense of mastery. Just like I'm speaking English, I still can't believe it. I still remember how hard it was to not know what I was saying, and to think in Spanish and then translate it and try to say it in English. But people could still tell that's not his language. Now people would not be able to tell that this is not my language. Same thing with anatomy. So that's my take on it for all of you. And also to be patient, because sometimes students will take my class. At the end of it, it's like, well, I still don't know this. It's like, listen, it really is like one semester of German. Do you really think you're going to go to Germany and fool people into thinking that you're German? It's like, no, it's going to take a while before you speak it well enough to come across as a German speaking person. So I'm an anatomy speaking person, Spanish speaking person, and English speaking person. So that's how it happens. Same thing with like perspective or things, other things I love. Before you know it, you start becoming a little bit of a master of a whole bunch of different little things like perspective and composition. So that's the beauty of being at a school, is that you have to take all these other classes and never think it's saying, oh, that's not something I want to do, because it's part of your vocabulary and you have to know all of these things. That's why schools set things up where it's like you have to take this class, this class, this class, and this class, because they all become a part of the totality of that language. So be really, really patient with yourself, because there's going to be classes that you will not like. I didn't like to spelling, for instance. Now I'm a great speller. It's because I start realizing it does make a difference when you write, and it does influence if somebody's going to hire you if you can't spell or if you're almost illiterate. So all of this is to just remind you that this is a hard road to hoe, and that it will take time. And at the same time, you don't have to know anatomy to the point like me where I teach it. You don't have to know, you just have to know enough to be able to draw or create or get whatever's in your head out. And one of the things that I didn't realize how important this was going to be is that I never thought of myself as a character designer or making up animals until I became a master of human anatomy. And I realized that what I had done for myself is that I had created a specialty animal that I became a master of. And that animal was the human being, the Homo sapien. So by learning that so well, it was so much easier when I got like my first animal anatomy books and I looked at them, I opened them up, I looked at them, studied them. It's like, it's the same damn thing. It's like, there's a tibia and a fibula and a femur and a pelvis and the same muscles. And it's like, this is amazing. There's a deltoid on that cat. There's a deltoid on that wolf. And all of a sudden it made it easier. And my friend Tara Whitlatch is great at this, because what she has done is she has taken her knowledge of animal anatomy and made creatures that never existed before. And they're convincing because she works from the inside out, just like I teach my suits. You have to know the skeleton before we start putting muscles on there. So be patient. For any of you that have ever learned how to play the piano or guitar, you'll know that it's like, well, you listen to your teacher. It's like, that's how I want to play. By next week, next year, it's going to take a while before you are able to play the piano or the guitar like he or she is playing, because they are your teachers. They are not playing the notes, they're playing the song. And that's the biggest difference. They're not thinking about what the next note is. They're just playing. When you listen to a kid's piano recital, it's like, well, I know what that song is, like name that tune. And it's like, oh, that's a Mozart piece. I know what that is. But you know it because they're playing the right keys, but they're playing them one key at a time. So it doesn't have the feeling of the song. And then you listen to Yo-Yo Ma or Itzhak Perlman or any of these masters of their instrument, and it's like, holy smokes, that's why I'm paying to watch them play and listen to them play. It's because they're not playing the notes, they're playing the feeling of that song. And that's what you're looking at right now when you look at this Peter Paul Rubens. because if I were to switch over to a more current time, then this is kind of the same thing. It's not quite as good as 400 years ago, but we're doing the same thing. We're making heroes out of people. This is heroic. This is not like your neighbor, mowing the lawn. This is something bigger. This is basically Marvel Comics 400 years ago. I'm just reading what we're saying here. If there's any questions, let me know, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example of how I teach anatomy in my classes. Okay, so we have this P-Par Rubens here. Jay, does somebody have a question?
I think you were just about to touch on it. It's from Ayush, who's asking. He's an animation student who's a novice at anatomy, and where would you suggest she starts? Should they start sculpting anatomy in 3D or practice drawing on paper?
That's a really hard question, because if somebody were to ask me, I want to learn how to play guitar. What should I do? I oftentimes would just say, like with anatomy, it's like I was really lucky. I had a really good anatomy teacher in Bern Hogarth. It's like, take an anatomy class for starters. And then one of the things I have for all of you is this. So I'm going to help you with this, because a lot of times, as you guys may see, I have a lot of books. And that's just part of it. I have pretty much every anatomy book you could think of, including my own. I just had my first anatomy book published this year. Start with good books. So this is something you could take a screenshot of, and if it's recorded and you guys could see this again, just make sure that you guys take down these books, because as many books as I have, many of them still look brand new because I don't pull them off the shelf very often. The ones that are really beat up and worn are the best books. So these are my beat up and worn out books. Okay, some of them are, and the good thing is that some of these people I know, like Elliot Goldfinger is one of my good friends, and I've known him for over 20 years, and he's got a couple really good anatomy books, one on human anatomy and one on animal anatomy. Another good friend is Oda Zarins, and he's got a great selection of anatomy books, and he's still going. I don't know how he does it, because I did one book and it took 3 years. My other good buddy is Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, so I didn't know him personally. I'm old, but not that old. But I've learned so much from good Leonardo books. But this one that you see here, I hope you guys could see my screen, was published by Getty, the Getty Museum. And it's fabulous, because it has, for any of you that have seen his drawings, he always has a lot of writing off to the side. And what they did is they translated all his notes. And it was illuminating, because it turns out that he was teaching us, he was speaking to us. He knew he was going to die at some point. So he wrote things as if it was almost like a Socrates, Aristotle, Plato kind of a thing, where they ask questions more than anything else, or he puts it in a certain way where he'll say, don't, when you see this, this is what that is. So the best thing you could do is get a whole bunch of wonderful books. The next thing I would do is what I'm going to do for you right now. Is you have those books in front of you, and then find reference. And I would tell you, and this is something I'm really, really very adamant about, use art rather than photographs of models. I'm really very, very adamant about that. With my students, they cannot use photographs. They always have to find art, whether it's Michelangelo's David or whatnot. So this is what I would have you do to answer your question. Take something like this, put tracing paper over it, so all of a sudden it looks like this, right? have your books open, whatever books that you got, and pick a section. And right now what I'm doing is the leg. The leg is from the knee down to the foot. Okay, so in this case, the way I teach this to make it easier is I tell you that there's only 6 essential muscles of the leg that you have to know. And we're not talking about the thigh and the gluteal muscles, because sometimes when I say leg, people think of the whole limb, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's kind of like chicken pieces. If you ask for a leg, they give you a part of the limb. If you ask for a thigh, they give you another part of the limb. Together, it's the entire limb without the foot. You understand what I'm saying? So in anatomy, it's the same thing. I'm talking about the leg right now. So watch this. Now, granted, you're not in my class. I only have a few moments with you. But what you do is you look for certain landmarks. Like, for instance, the patella or the kneecap is in here, in this area. Okay, now, just south of that is another bump. Now, in this case, I think they put it up a little bit too high. So I'm going to put it where I think it belongs. But the 6 essential muscles of the leg are these. And you can see them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make them into couples, almost like you're having people over for dinner, you know, and they're married couples. So the peroneals are coming over. So peroneus brevis and peroneus longus. So peroneus brevis is this really neat muscle that you won't see, but you'll see evidence of it. Watch. It's down here, and then the tendon uses this ankle as a pulley. And the cable of that pulley does this, and you can actually see that in this drawing. It goes down to this little tuberosity, and the tuberosity is a bony protrusion on a foot or on a bone. And it's basically this. Like, if you were to look at your footprint, it might look something like this. You know, you have a wet footprint by the pool, and it may look kind of like this. It's that bony protrusion that creates your footprint expanding out. So from the side, it kind of looks like this. And then here's your toe, little toe. The neat thing is, this is my formula for it. It's at the halfway point, and then you have the other toes. How do you like them apples? See how like this anatomy stuff can be very easily gotten. And then there's a change of direction with this arc like that. But this is the tuberosity of 5th metatarsal. Now, that's a mouthful. So you don't need to remember that. Just remember it's that little bump on the side of your foot. The cable I'm putting in goes like this, and then does that. So what happens is that when this contracts, it allows you to get up on your tiptoes. How do you like that? So it straightens out that tendon. But in this case, that muscle does this. You won't see it. And then the second one is a longer version. And it does that. And it creates like a shadow here sometimes, especially with you women wearing high heels. If you get up on your tiptoes or wearing high heels, this muscle contracts and it creates a shadow right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to number these. That's number 2, sorry. 2. This is number 1, and this is the way I teach this. So those are the first 2 muscles. So what I would want you to do, I think that was Marilyn who asked that question, is get a whole bunch of really neat reference from the internet of all these, like Pontormo, all these old, or Del Sarto. These are just great drafts people that draw really, really well. Everybody knows Raphael. These are just suggestions. But you look for these Michelangelo's David, for instance, and you'd be surprised. These guys knew anatomy so incredibly well, especially if you think about Michelangelo, for God's sake. What was his medium? Did he use Photoshop? No, he was working with marble, for God's sakes. Anyway, so number 1 and number 2 are already done. So all I'm going to do is just kind of colorize them so you can see. There, number 1, number 2 are done. We're done with that. The neat thing is that if you look at the head of your fibula, and you can feel it on the side of your knee, there's a bump, like a knob, and your ankle, who does not see this ankle right outside of your shoe, right? That triangular piece. So if you kind of bridge the gap between that head of the fibula, which is what that is, it's the smaller of the 2 bones. And if you look at your tibia like this, there's a little bone off to the side that is just as long, but it starts lower, so it ends lower, which means your ankle is at an angle, and then that little space in between is where your foot comes out of. How do you like them apples? Yeah, and then your kneecap is here, your femur comes in here. Look at everything, and this is like the fist pump. Now that we live in COVID, we kind of do this fist pump. So the fist pump that was existing before is the tibia and the femur coming together doing the fist pump. See that right there? How do you like that? And your kneecap and the ligament that attaches it to that, and there you go. So this is that. This is that down here. Got it? And in between are number 1 and number 2. So number 3 is going to be right in front. And number 3 is really, really beautiful because what it does is it extends your toes upward towards your face. This toe, this toe, this toe, and this toe. So for those of you that have tendony feet, if you pull your toes up towards your face, you'll see those tendons, especially here by the base of those toes. Not the big toe, that has its own tendon. This is number 3. And if you look up there, number 3 is called extensor digitorum longus. And that is exactly what it is. It's an extensor of your digits. And digits in Latin is both toes and fingers. So you have the same thing on your hand. Look at that. How do you like them apples or manzanas, depending on where you're from? So number 4 is its partner. And this one pulls your foot up towards your face, not just your toes, but watch this. See that diagonal right there? That is created by the tendon of that muscle, number 4. Because I'm doing these in order. See how easy that is? The muscle fibers go like this, and it pulls your foot up because it's actually attached underneath the arch of your foot, underneath your foot, like you're stepping on it. That's that. And you could actually see it here. That is also number 4. And the tendon is very visible here. That is number 4. And I'm going to put a T for tendon. So you see a little bit of it there. So far, so good. Now I'm going to make these both pink because they're partners. There. Then you have number 5 and number 6. Watch this. There's a little sliver of muscle right there. And then your calf muscle. And this is something the old masters would do all the time. Watch. See over here. Yeah, oh, you'll see this all the time. I'm going to exaggerate this muscle because this is like Peter Paul Rubens or Leonardo da Vinci, so that there's a bounce between the two muscles. Like that. So this is number 6, and this is number 5. And they're both attached to the heel by number 7, the Achilles tendon. So now I'm going to have to come up with some other funky color. Okay, green. Soleus gastrocnemius. And they over here dominate the whole inside of the leg. So this is both soleus and gastrocnemius. Watch this. You like this. If you don't like this, I don't know what more I can do. The inside of your leg is very much simpler than the outside. And this is the Achilles tendon. So let me number these. This is number 6. This is number 6 because they're 2 heads. One is lower than the other. And then this is number 5. And then this is number 7. How do you like them apples? You like them apples? Good. A lot of this is actually bone right in here. Now, I don't know who's with me, but watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you what I've already done with this Peter Paul Rubens. It's something I did beforehand. Now, let's look at something like this and see how much anatomy these guys knew. See the bouncing over here? See where the little no smoking sign is? Right in here. Okay, they always bounced around, making it even better. There, look at that. See that? So number 1 and number 2. Number 3 and number 4. Number 5 and number 6. So when you look at something like this, it's like, oh, I can't know that. That's too much. Until somebody explains it to you. Then it's like ordering a sandwich at a German deli place somewhere. Or, you know, when I was in Florence, Italy, you know, speaking in Italian. Eventually you start being able to at least ask for certain things. And right now, hopefully you'll be able to understand a little bit more of a leg. Now, I have more stuff I want to show you. Because I do this all the time to learn anatomy. Oftentimes, you just find something from somebody that knows anatomy already, like Peter Paul Rubens here. He knows a lot of anatomy. Then you dissect it. And this is how I taught myself after Bernhard Hogarth's class. And the interesting thing is, once he died, I took over his class and I taught it for 23 years at the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. And I think I did a great job. There, do you see that? Look how fun that is. You have to admit, that is just really fun. And I did that all myself. Now, it's easier now that I have a Cintiq tablet, but in those days, I would just transfer the outline of whatever it is I was drawing and transpose it onto like nice paper. So I would have the outline and then I would just draw with a ballpoint pen. Any questions thus far? Because what I'm going to do is just do a little demo about how to at least just get the whole body in. And well, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I had a question, Ray, and it was regarding the lower limb when you were describing the leg and the thigh. I guess in CG land, especially in rigging, because I had this conversation once when I was working at a company, they like to refer to the leg as the lower leg, and then the thigh as the upper leg. Is that sort of, because you mentioned earlier about when someone really knows anatomy, they can tell when someone is still learning. Is that one of the giveaways, like a upper arm, upper leg, lower leg?
It is, yeah. Yeah, and at the same time, I still remember Bern Hogarth saying that it's like, no, it's not Van Gogh, it's Van Gogh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, so but what happens is, Jay, when something just becomes like, it's like saying the word ain't. That was such a no-no for a long time that they finally had to put it in the dictionary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's okay. So I'm not like one of these guys that's going to start correcting people.
Yeah.
But I just want to try to make it clearer. So the lower leg, it's like then the thigh. It's like, well, then why even say lower leg? But then it makes it clear to the average person that is still learning. And sometimes it's easier just to communicate rather than try to be so correct about everything. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. But there is, it's and that's why I like saying, the chicken parts, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty clear. We don't say it's like the lower leg of
Yeah.
the chicken. You just say, well, I just have a leg.
Yeah.
So,
but I guess I think, when people call it no one, well, in rigging anyway, that I know of, would call it the forearm. It would always be the lower arm, but the name forearm kind of implies it's before the arm kind of thing.
Right.
So,
yeah, and different languages, different, like for instance, in Spanish, and I've asked, living in Southern California, of course, my students are from all over the world. Sometimes I do ask if there's a different word for fingers and toes. And in most cases, there isn't, like in Spanish, it's just dedos. So you have to say, or digits, right? The digits of the hand and the digits of the feet. Which ones are you talking about, right? So in English, it's easy because you say fingers and you say toes. So everything is kind of like you have to try to remember who you're talking to and what language you're using. And in the case of anatomy, it's Latin and Greek, and they use digits. So it's, extensor digitorum. There's an extensor digitorum on your feet and an extensor digitorum on your hands. So you have to try to remember that there is a difference, even though they're using the same terminology.
Just in the question of terminology, it's just a question from Sina, who's asking. She wants to know if there's a difference between artistic anatomy and regular anatomy.
Well, regular anatomy, I'm wondering if she means, like if you're in medical school. Anatomy, basically, it's a word that we got from the ancient Greeks. So it just means cross-section. Cross-section, the anatomy of a tree, for instance. Got it? So it just means like seeing the inside. So artistic anatomy, there is a big difference. Artistic anatomy, if you buy a book on anatomy, and it doesn't say artistic anatomy, it's going to be usually medical. It's going to have physiology. It's going to have innervation, where the nerves are, the veins, things like that. Artistic anatomy is usually, and this is what I am, I'm artistic anatomist. I don't pretend to know, what the liver does or anything like that. I mean, I do, but I don't talk about it. Artistic anatomy is basically the muscles that change and create the morphology of the human body. What is making your body look the way it does? That's morphology, or the outer surface, the muscles that touch the skin that push out. So that's artistic anatomy. Therefore, we have over 600 muscles of the human body, but artistic anatomy, to me, and it depends on who you're talking to, but with me, it's less than a deck of cards. It's about 45 muscles that make up the muscles that change and make you see what the body is. Got it? So Sienna, that was a really good question. So artistic anatomy is basically the surface anatomy. When I look at this beautiful drawing, now, how isn't this the same as this? See the line work, all of that, it's all the same things. Now, granted, I do believe that Andrea del Sarto is much better. Are there any other questions before I draw this?
Yeah, Tom's got a question about the leg. Yeah, so if we go back to that
Yeah.
quickly, he's just asking, it's about the flexors of the medial aspect of the leg, and if they show, or if not, or if they ever do. So I think it's just visually, are the flexors, can they be visually seen or not seen?
Yeah, the medial aspect of the leg is interesting because watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to do like and forgive me for the fact that I draw very lightly first, but this is the rhythm of the entire limb. Okay, watch this. The muscles of the thigh are more dominant in front of the bone. Okay, there's a bone inside here. Bones inside here, down to the ground. The neat thing about this is how the body is, it has a common sense to it. Like if this is the femur, then this is your tibia. I'm not sure if you can see what I'm doing, but watch. And foot. So you see, I'm drawing the same thing off to the side, and then here's your pelvis. And then here's your patella. Well, this length, this is the longest bone of the human body. If you double that, it takes you down to the ground. So if it's a short person, then it's like this. See, the problem is that more often than not, when students are drawing, they'll make the thigh much longer than the leg and the foot. But if you just remember that formula, whatever the thigh is, then you double that and that takes you to the ground, whether you're 4'11" or 6'11". It's the same thing. But the muscles are dominant in the front. See, there's more muscle here, and then it changes to the back of the leg. So does that not look like a leg already, or the entire limb? And then these are your butt muscles. So the rhythm does this, and then it comes back to this. And I'm trying to keep an eye on this relationship, because then see, I went way too far down here. So this is where the foot should be, not where I thought it was initially. I'm definitely fallible. So there, like that. That's the rhythm of that leg. But let me get to the question. The outside part of the leg has more visible muscles. It's just the way it is. At some point I'll ask why, when I'm dead, and ask, God, nature, whatever, why that is. But the fact is, these are the 6 essential muscles I just talked about. Remember, watch. 1, 2, one's on top of the other. 3, and that's the one that goes to the toes. 4, and that's the drumstick of the human body, is that. I think of everything as like a drumstick because of the way, we're designed. And then if I put another drumstick over here, see, it's the same design. Meaning this, there's an origin or a beginning of all muscles and insertion. So, and then it starts all over again, origin and insertion. Watch up here. This spot that I'm drawing here is origin. This spot over here is insertion. The tendon at origin is short. The tendon at insertion is long. It's like if you're pulling something with a cord or a rope, you are the muscle, the rope is the tendon. The muscle is in between. So if you keep adding and adding and adding origin insertion, before you know it, you have the drumstick. The muscle bellies are like that. So if I took that and put it this way, it's a leg with a foot at the end. Do you see? It's a drumstick, for God's sakes.
That's all I'm going to see now, Ray, just walking drumstick people.
Yeah. Yeah, and look at how this is coming together. But watch what happens when I show you the other leg. the entire limb. Watch. Drumstick, got it. But what you see, and you can look at yourself in the mirror, like those kinds of mirrors, like if you're buying new shoes and you want to see what they look like on you, you'll notice that your calf muscles are really dominant. And then like a ice cream cone, I always talk about food for some reason. I always teach hungry, and that makes everything kind of like food related. Watch. So that is the soleus, gastrocnemius, and Achilles tendon. And then this is all bone right in here, except for the other arc here, that's number 4, the tibialis anterior. But let me see if I could actually draw the bone. The bone is very dominant. That's why it hurts so much when we hit a low table, is because that edge of that bone is very exposed. So the medial part of the leg is very easy to understand, because all it is almost exclusively is just the gastrocnemius, soleus, and Achilles tendon. Let me just give it a little bit of color so you can separate it from the tendon. There, that's the soleus in hot pink, and in softer pink is the 2 heads of the gastrocnemius. How do you like them apples?
Great. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I don't. Davis has just had a question on science. He's asking. He's a 3D modeling student, and he loves to sculpt and draw characters. How do you create a stylized or cartoon character? How do you choose which anatomical details to keep and which to simplify or eliminate?
That's a good question too, because but it's also a tricky one to answer, simply because what happens is the more you know, the more you know how to answer that question for yourself. Now, I do not ever want to cop out and say, oh, you just know it. It's like, what happens is this: when I'm speaking, if somebody didn't know English that well, how did you know to say, how do you like them apples? That doesn't make sense. What do you mean apples? You know, we weren't talking about food. It's like, it's a stylization I use in my language that is me. You may not say, how do you like them apples? You just heard me say, how do you like them apples at least 3 times. Do you know that you understand kind of what I mean? That it's kind of like an expression. So what happens is that once you have a mastery of a language, then you never need to ask that question, because you will know. So the answer is keep doing what you do, because a lot of times what happens is this. As a matter of fact, let me do something for you, and then I will hopefully answer that by doing this, like this. Like, how do you know how to copy that? Well, I don't know if I knew how to do that before, but I know how to do it now. So let me show you. I draw something to anchor. Okay, so that's the head. And I always draw it as a globe, and I always put an equator. And you know what the equator is? The equator is the eyebrow. And the eyes are below the eyebrow. We know that. So I'm going to just scribble this. And where's the nose? Well, the shadow of the nose is underneath here, because I want to just sketch. So how do you know what, Mr. A, when you are drawing, especially copying something like this or making something up, which is drawing something that's in your head, is there any difference? I'm drawing something that you could see, but imagine if this was in my head, I'd still have to be clear about what it is I'm showing you. So what do I choose to show you? I choose right now to keep everything just as simple as possible. This is what I call the main frame. The main frame is from shoulder to great trochanter. Oh, the great trochanter is this right over here. I hope you can see what I'm drawing over here on the Del Sarto drawing. it's the beginning of your femur. And I know he knows where it's at because he created the indentation there. And it goes across to the other side like this. So watch how simplified this is. Now, the good thing is, if I were to draw a line across to the other side, the pubic bone is right where it's supposed to be, meaning the genitals are right below it. So what I need to remember is, where would the underwear be if this guy was wearing underwear, like Superman underwear? It would be like here. And the opening would be like this. It goes around the great trochanter. Let me see if I could draw it with, like, put little black European swimsuit on this guy. So the underwear hides the genitals, which is a good indicator of what's called the pelvic frame. Watch, the belt is here. So now he's got his little briefs on, right? Which is great because right above the genitals is where the pubic bone is. And the pubic bone is right on the same line as the great trochanters of the femur. So this is the femur right in here. So knowing that, watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a little cup here to hold the genitals, and a little opening for the leg, or the thigh, I should say, sorry. And the Superman underwear. Look how easy that is. This is something that just basically will make so much sense you won't even believe it. Okay, now watch what I'm going to do. This is called the tornado when you're making stuff up. I'm just drawing a tornado. Do you see that? Tornado has a direction to it. So the top part, or the closest part to me, is here. And then the tornado all of a sudden changes direction and it goes back like this. So all of a sudden the front part goes like this. It's like drawing two cylinders, right? Depending on who your teacher is, you might do that. And then it's like the other one is like this. It's kind of like the same thing. I like the tornado version of it because it gives you a really dynamic change of direction. So what am I going to augment here? What am I going to add that he didn't add? You know what I'm going to add? The rectus femoris, what I call the Captain America muscle, which is right in the front. Watch, does this not look familiar if you think about Marvel Comics? So I want that to come out more than the way he did it. So I'm going to augment it. So even though I'm looking at something, I'm still adding my own touches to it. I want to have that muscle come out because it looks like a trout sitting on top of your thigh. And there's a muscle. This is the muscle that I need you guys to know, sartorius. It's the longest muscle of your body. It's at the hip right in here. Do you see where I'm at over here with the del sarto?
Yeah.
And it separates the adductor muscles, which are these. See this bubble muscle right in here? Look at that bubble muscle from the quadriceps. For any of you that work out, you know the quadriceps are in the front of your thigh. So watch what I'm going to do, because that creates that really dynamic look to the leg. Plus it creates that indentation. Now watch what I'm going to do over here. I'm going to just do the same thing. I'm just going to do the scribble thing like this, and then connect it. Here's where the knee is. Here's this bubble. And here are the muscles we just talked about. The gastrocnemius, soleus, and Achilles tendon. And yes, I'm going to say it one more time. How do you like them apples? And the sartorius. So do yourself a favor. Look for images like this, or like Marvel Comics, I don't care. And this is where, oops, let me put a little layer on here. this is where the rectus femoris is, which they didn't really put in. But I'm going to put it in because I think it looks better. And this is the sartorius. And this is the sartorius. 400 years later. There, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. So
is it a bit like almost like film design, Ray, where I guess when you're building a film set, you don't want to put everything in that's there. You start stripping away and then just revealing the important bits that do tell the story, or in this case, do sell the anatomy or sell the characteristics of the character that you want to portray.
And that's always been true. That's always, I mean, great poetry is the reduction of words, right? It's like less is more. I mean, all these like cliches are cliches simply because they are true. Here's where the arm would be, and then the forearm. And I look for, you know what I use? I use the word constellation. Okay, so here's a star. Where's the wrist? Oh, that's another star. And it works out better because then the bend of the elbow is over here of the other arm. But where's the wrist? The wrist is like a star and it's over here. And before you know it, you're actually plotting where things are instead of putting them where you think they are, because your brain will actually be a hindrance to you, because your brain is telling you what it thinks it knows rather than what it really sees. So it's a really big dilemma for artists, is that you have to fight your brain. Your brain is trying to fix something that doesn't need fixing. It's trying to simplify something when you need to see it more clearly as to where something is, instead of like thinking of like what you think it is. See what it is, because a hand could actually start looking very abstract because of the various positions it can take. So that's the way I would start feeling out this form. What else can I help you guys with?
Yeah, if anyone else has any questions they'd like to put to Ray while he's sketching away, then feel free to drop them in the Q&A. I've never seen the tornado method, Ray. I thought that was really nice. That's
fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Watch this. It's like, oh man, Mr. Ray's really good. Look at that drawing. You know what I mean? It's like, the funny thing is like I realize my limitations, so I've had to come up with ways like this. But the tornado really helps, because when you're ideating, when you're just kind of creating something, it's best to just kind of keep it really simple. And look how effective that is, because now you already have like the foundation of these lines telling you if you're going to put any hash lines, and you do that with Marvel Comics or anything like that, or just ideating, it really helps. It really helps in creating a dynamic pose. There's like a version of that. And then if I wanted to, watch what happens when you shade something, it bends it.
Yeah.
There. Now I just bent that knee even more.
I know I found with cylinders, I get so caught up in doing the most amazing cylinder, which I can never do, that it kind of throws me from like what you're creating is just a lot of movement running through it, because it is so, loose and gestural still. So
and you know what? And people like that. People like when something feels effortless. It's like I said about like the guy playing the piano at the lounge, right? And he's talking to the pretty girls, and he's got the tip jar, and he's talking about he's playing the piano. It's like he's not even thinking about piano. He's thinking about, this pretty girl that's talking to him. And it's to me, it's always been one of the most amazing things. Not being musical, I've always thought, God, I wonder what that feels like, until I realized that we all do that to some degree, right? If you're at work and you do something that's repetitive, you're doing it. You're not thinking about it like you did when you were first learning how to do it. So once it becomes rote, then it's internalized, and then it becomes more effortless. And like I'm talking to you right now, I'm just kind of doodling, just to pass time, because it's fun and it's easy. And you guys get to see, how I'm just doing something. I'm just drawing. I'm just playing the piano while we're talking. But I know that this is the tricep lateral head here. Watch. And it gets pulled back towards the elbow. Then the bicep here is contracted. And then these muscles come in like this. Because I happen to know that they follow the thumb. So does Andrea Del Sarto, because he's doing exactly, without me looking at what he's doing, I already know what he's doing. So I don't need to ask him or look at his work to know that these muscles are turning this way, because the thumb is, see the thumb, if I were to put a thumb here, is way over here. It's hidden behind this hand, right? Which means it's like wringing a towel, and you could see that the muscles are actually twisting, and you can see that right there on Andrea Del Sarto. It's amazing that he's speaking my language. Do you like that? Isn't that fabulous?
Yeah. So I guess even without, if the sketch didn't have the hand there, but it had the forearm, you'd be able to fill in, let's say, where the thumb should go just by seeing the movement of the muscles on the forearm.
Exactly. And you could pull out whatever you want. That's why this drawing to me does not look like a real person. It looks better. Why? Because the artist knows so much that this does not look like any like academic drawing, right? Jay, it's not realistic. It's better than realistic. But so it's like when you're looking at something like this, I don't want it to look like me. I'm kind of frumpy and dumpy and old and this and that. It's like, no, you want everything to be heroic. I mean, if I were working at Marvel, I would add the tricep lateral head. The deltoid is not in the right place. You would have to add to it. And I used to feel funny about correcting things, like I saw like on Peter Paul Rubens or whatever, until I realized that, they were just sketching. And a lot of times they're not thinking, gosh, 400 years from now, somebody's going to be working on some tea tablet, analyzing my work. But it is so fabulous. But I could look at something like this and see what I would have added to it. So I'm not a slave to what I see or don't see. And that's the whole point, is when you look at a model, the model doesn't give you all the information. The information is in your head, but you have to have it in your head to begin with, for Pete's sake. The old masters would never do this. Watch, Jay. See that indentation? This does not exist. That is a concavity. There are no concavities. There's only convexities. So they would bounce it outward like that. There. That's more of the way they would do it.
But I guess that's important as well, is like you said, that there may be, it might be a sketch here where there might be something that doesn't quite feel right, but it's okay to look at a great artist from 400 years ago and say, maybe that's not quite as it should be. Here's my interpretation of that, or here's where I think it would be correct. Because I guess some people will look at some art and just say that's perfect as it is, without cross-examine it, essentially, or
and that's a really good point, Jay, because I do tell my students that it doesn't matter who you're looking at. Like, I'm a big Beatles fan, and or Mozart. It's like, but these are human beings. So there's certain times when it's like, I don't care for that song that much, or this is, it's not quite as good as this other one. When you look at these drawings by somebody like Del Sarto, or even this Peter Paul Rubens, I mean, these are exquisite drawings. But it doesn't mean that they're they're godlike. These are human beings, and there are certain times when it's like, yeah, I might not do exactly that, but the fact is that they're also not copying the body. They're drawing the body the way they see it, and that's what makes it so beautiful. So sometimes I think it's those variations that make a drawing or a piece of art perfect, is that it's not perfect. And you don't want to look for perfect, because perfect can actually be very boring.
Mm. Yeah. And I guess I was going to ask early on, actually, you mentioned about not working from photographs. And is that why then? Because there's almost more to analyze in someone's sketch and drawings than there are in a photograph. So does that make you work harder in terms of trying to?
Yeah, and if you think about it, Jay, it makes a lot of sense. When you see a really good drawn image like this, okay, you could tell this is not a photograph. It's better. Why? Because the artist has already done all the hard work. He's put his years of experience and knowledge of anatomy. I mean, Peter Paul Rubens studied anatomy for 8 years in Rome so he could do something like this out of his head, or out of his head using a model. Because you could have both, right? You could look at a model and use them for certain information, but you put in all this stuff. Oh, I don't, on this particular model, I don't see this, but I'm going to pull it out. Or I do see this, but I'm going to not put it in. So you are able to edit better. So what happens is, the more knowledge you have, the more you don't rely on the model. But when you're learning, the best thing to do is to not look at photographs, because a lot of times you are basically reliant on the photography. Now, granted, this is a professional photographer, and he and she know what they're doing, and they light everything beautifully, but it is a photograph. Oftentimes there's a slight bit of lens distortion, and sometimes the shadows are too dark because, it looks all artsy and beautiful. I know this because I work with New Masters Academy, and they take painstaking lengths to make sure that the photographs are perfect. But I look at them, and it's still not like this, because the artist that drew this is pulling things out that you wouldn't see necessarily in a photograph. So it's already been done. The anatomy's already been pulled out. You see what I mean? So when I look at this Del Sarto, it's like, look at it. He's already done all the hard work for you.
Yeah.
And he pulls things out, and he hides things, and it's like, oh my goodness, it's already done. So I would tell students, especially the one that was asking me about, what could I do to get a little bit better at this? It's like, you know what, just start analyzing these drawings. But I did something like this, Del Sarto, with my books open. Yeah. And I would question, what is this? What's this? What's this? What's it? And then all of a sudden it's like, I know what it is. And I would put tracing paper over it. So it would look like this. Watch. See the tracing paper I just put all over it?
Yeah.
So what I would do is this. Okay, here's the outline. What's this? And then I would have my anatomy books open and say, oh, that's the tricep lateral head. And the deltoid. Oh, see, the good thing about everybody, it doesn't matter if it's you, me, where you were born, is that we're all the same. All these muscles are in the same place. And it turns out when you look at a dog, it's the same darn thing. I've drawn my dog's arm, and he's got his, biceps, and he's like this, she's like this, and then her paws like this, like that. This is my dog's arm.
I was watching a documentary about it was just an animal documentary. It had kangaroos mating, and the male kangaroos just looked like giant versions of the Hulk. They just, all arms, and so they just looked insane. Like, it's so human almost, but with a long tail on the end.
Yeah, and this is my dog. I've drawn my dog. She is a good model. And I could see her fur. I could actually see a little shadow here, and the same one that you see here on this Del Sarto drawing. It's the same things, same thing. So these so this is the way I would suggest people start trying to learn a little bit more anatomy where it's not painstaking. It should be actually fun. The bone here, that's the ulna, separates the flexors from extensors. If all you learn is flexors and extensors, that's enough oftentimes. Like when I have like an arm, the back of an arm, it may look kind of like this. Watch. See, and this is the hand, so the thumb's on the other side. Okay, kind of like that. Watch. If I just draw 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, those are all the extensors that we have that show. So this is the inconius. This is the extensor carpi ulnaris, extensor digitorum, extensor carpi radialis longus, and that's it. You don't need to know the names of them. You just need to know some of the basics. All of this stuff just comes in time. First, maybe know the flexors and extensors as groups. The triceps, just as a group, the bicep. And before you know it, look, I can't help but to draw anatomy now. And then this is bone, and then this is the bone that separates the extensors from the flexors. And then you hide as much as you want or bring out as much as you want. You don't want everybody to be muscular, because what happens is once you learn something, you tend to overdo everything. The good thing is to learn something and then hide it. So people don't think, oh, that's an anatomical drawing. No, it's a drawing like I'm doing right now with anatomy in it. Remember the bouncing? There's no concave lines, they're convexities. So this is the gastrocnemius, this is the soleus, this is the bone of the tibia, or the fibula, sorry. This is the bone of the tibia of over here. The fibula, tibia, that separates the other side, which is the gastrocnemius soleus. And look what I'm doing. I'm just speaking, just like I'm speaking to you in English. And I know because when I didn't know English, it was really awkward until I did know English. And now I don't have to think about it, for Pete's sake. Same thing with anatomy. So the thing that I had going for me is I remember how hard it was to learn English. Anatomy was much easier.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a lot less words. It's like 45 words, for God's sakes. It's 10,000.
I guess it is just the interesting. The thing that
when you don't know something, can I tell you a story, Jay?
Yeah.
It's kind of like one time I had an electrician come out because I needed to do something in my breaker box. I don't know if you've ever seen an electrician take off that whole big panel.
Yeah.
Like you see the switches, the breaker switches.
Yeah.
Okay, that looks kind of easy until you take that off. And then you see like a million wires. So the reason I get an electrician is because I'm not going to start messing around with that, right? And all of a sudden never do a webinar again because I'm fried. So what happens is I get somebody I think knows what they're doing. So I get an electrician over. He takes off the panel off the thing, and there's like a million wires. He goes, "Oh, this is easy. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that." And it's like, how can it be easy? You know why it's easy? Because he knows what he's looking at. That's his language. Those wires are easy to him. To me, it looks like spaghetti. To him, it's like, oh, yeah, this is an easy job. It'll take about an hour. I'll charge you this much. I'll say, charge me whatever because I have no idea what you're doing. Yeah. It's because he knows what he's looking at. So it's not complicated. English isn't complicated unless you don't know English. Then it's very complicated. To me, if I had to learn Japanese by next year so I could teach a class, it would be impossible. But not to a 5-year-old Japanese child, right? So when you're immersed in something, then it's easy. So none of this is easy. None of it is hard. It just, when you don't know something, it can be harder than it really is. So this anatomy thing, believe me, I don't have any kind of like super duper intelligent powers. I'm just an average Joe. So if I can learn this, anybody can learn this. But you do
Okay.
need a little bit of
I
time
was
to.
just going to say, so that's very important though, I guess, because I guess with online learning or just learning in general, people are sold the idea that you can learn anatomy in 8 weeks. If you do an 8-week course, then you'll be an expert in anatomy. Or if you do a 12-week course, you'll be an expert in this and that. And I've never been a fan of that, kind of push of learning, which is, drum everything into you in 8 weeks and you're good to go, at this, that, the other. So was there a point in your kind of, learning of anatomy that you suddenly felt like you had now got to a stage where, you had mastered it, or are you still learning anatomy now?
No, it's just like I'm still learning English. 25 years ago, Google didn't mean anything to me. I mean, the www, we learn things all the time. But I do know how to answer that, Jay, simply because now this goes to all of us who had to learn a different language of the country that you live in. So I came from Colombia, South America. So I was born speaking Spanish, and then we came to this country, and all of a sudden I had to start from scratch. It's like, oh my God, it's frustrating. But there was a time, because I lived here, that I was learning English little by little. But it's like watching a tree grow. It's growing, but if you just stare at it, it's like nothing's happening. No, there is something happening. If you walk away from it and come back in a year and look at it and splice that with what you just saw, it's like, oh, it just jumped. It just made a movement, right? Like a baby. So there's a certain point when you're learning a different language, like with me in English, I still remember I had to translate a lot in my head. Like, I know what I want to say, but it was hard. So I would be speaking to somebody and I would be snapping my fingers. Now I do that with Spanish, by the way. Like, oh God, what's that word in Spanish? That kind of thing. So it totally got flipped. But I do remember one morning when I knew I had transitioned. I had walked from a Spanish speaking person into a room where I was an English speaking person, because I woke up that morning and I still remember thinking, I just dreamt in English. Do you see what I mean? It's like, oh my goodness, I don't have to translate anymore. Yeah. It's like I'm an English speaking person. The same thing happened with anatomy. I used to study anatomy and draw these things just like I'm doing right now with you guys. I did many of these on my own. Yeah. Bern Hogarth's class didn't, all of a sudden it's like, well, I could teach this now. I had to keep doing this. And at a certain point, I was drawing. I could tell you exactly when it happened. I was at a workshop and the model was up there and it was a woman. And I still remember I was drawing, and I was really liking this drawing, right? So I'm drawing. I looked up, there was no model on the stand. She had been on a break for like the last 5 minutes. It's like, oh, what was I doing then? I was just drawing.
Yeah.
I didn't rely on the model anymore. And then I was able to do it without the model being there at all. Now it's nice to have a model there because they give you the pose and the inspiration, and the umph and everything like that. But I still remember it's like the better I got anatomy, and I didn't know this until I looked back on it, the less I looked at the model.
You just got the cool structure and
remember, Jay, when you're a student, right? All you do is almost like stare at the model, and then you look down at your paper, and then you look back up because like, oh gosh, I lost my place. I don't know what's going on. And then you don't realize this, but you look at your paper more and more and more. I wish somebody had told me that.
Yeah.
Because I didn't realize that was me learning, and I would have been more encouraged by that. It's like, oh, you know what? I could draw on my drawing for like 5 minutes without looking up.
Yeah.
The model gets off the stand and I could keep drawing. That's how you could start gauging your own progress.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I think I was told, yeah, you got to look at your subject more than the paper. But yeah, it's
And
interesting.
eventually you don't need it. It's
Yeah,
kind of like, look at I always go back to music, right, Jay? So you're learning this piano piece. Little by little, you don't have to look at that sheet anymore. And before you know it, do you think it's like, you go watch Yo-Yo Ma play the cello in concert, that somebody's turning pages for him?
yeah,
It's like, no, it's like, no, he not only internalized the notes,
mm,
the feeling of the song.
mm,
And that's when I can interpret what I'm looking at with a model. And I interpret the model, that what I feel when I'm looking at the model and what I feel from that pose.
mm,
And that's when you transition to not copying or drawing the model. You're actually interpreting and internalizing what the model is saying to you personally, so that my drawing of this model looks different than your drawing of that model.
yeah,
And that other person next to you. Pretty
yeah.
exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially when you start talking about feeling, because that's I do a lot of CG now at the minute, and when we're discussing materials of leather or plastic or metal, one of the things I will ask the students is, as much as it looks like metal, let's say, I'll say, does it, they'll say, what does metal look like? And I'll be like, well, go out and touch metal and feel it and get a sense for it, not just looking at a Google image. The same for leather, like you need to go out and feel the material before you can start creating it, because I guess it's the same with you with anatomy, is like you say, you almost can feel the muscle pulling or the bone protruding, and that's what you're picking up and jotting down.
That's it. That's it. And sometimes, the longer you are an artist, the more you realize everything is interconnected. Like one of the best things I try to tell my students is, like, go out sometime and just sit in a park and
Yeah.
draw a tree,
Yeah,
a really good old established tree like this. Watch. I hope you could see this.
yeah,
Okay, so with every stroke, I'm saying something to you. You like the tornado, so I'll use the tornado just for you. Okay, do you see what's happening? So watch this. So these forms are going away from you. But then all of a sudden, there's another one that's going the other direction. Sorry that there's a leg in the way, but you'll still get the idea of what I'm telling you. This is the way you draw a body. It's the same thing. It's limbs. That's why we use the same terminology. What's this? Oh, it's a limb. Oh, what's this over here? Oh, it's a limb. So this is one of the best things I could teach my students. Is like, which direction is that tree trunk falling? And which direction is that limb going? One is going away, and you could do the same thing when you're drawing body, because see, a line is an abstraction that we created as human beings. We don't really have lines around. I look at my arm right now, my hand, there are no lines around it. So it is a symbol, but it's a really incredible symbol. And I like it. That's why a lot of times I don't like super realism, because you have to get rid of all line. Now, when you paint, when you oil paint, you don't want to take a Sharpie and put a big line around something. So I'm talking about specifically the art of drawing is about line. See this line? Just because I hit it harder, you see the calf muscle more than anything else. That I just changed the composition of this drawing by putting an accent there, just like I would if I were speaking. It's like, Jay, did you hear me? It's like, I just emphasize something. It's like, like, Jay, listen to me. Listen to me. See, it's conversational drawing. It's like, what am I saying? And every once in a while I hit this hard, and all of a sudden, you can't help but to see that. And that correlates with that over there. So all of a sudden you see these as something that connects with the other. It's conversational drawing. You like that term? I like that term.
No, I do. I'm actually, I'll send you a link later to something I'm working on, which kind of touches on some of what you're saying. But because I think with a conversation, and like you say, it's good to learn, writing or putting together an email, because if your structure is the same throughout the whole thing, it can be very shouty or very, monotone almost. So having that variation in your line is just the same as having good writing, where you have variation in a script or in the emphasis of the delivery of a line. So yeah,
as long as people always remember that there's a correlation between everything, because one of the things that you just mentioned reminded me of really, there used to be an art to oration. People would like come from miles around to listen to a good orator. Just like in the 1800s, right? Before TV, before Google and everything. It's like, somebody could fire up an audience to this fever pitch just by the way they spoke. That's the way your drawings should be. They should not be monotone and boring. They should be poetic and say something. Look at this drawing that I just did of this simple, like lower limb of a human being. It says something. I'm even going to pull the iliotibial band so it looks like it's stretching like that. This isn't real. If you look at a person in the room and they're a model and they're nude, they're not going to look like this. But for some reason, this resonates with you and your brain, saying it's like, well, that's a pretty good limb. It's not realistic, but there's something about it that I kind of like. And that is me putting myself into this drawing. And then when I add white, then that adds another element. Now, but watch what happens, because I'm going to add color to this. So all of a sudden there's another element. See, everything makes a difference. Everything.
Yeah.
Oh, color. It's like, because you get an emotional reaction to color. And all of a sudden it looks like, wow, he's doing so much. Look at that. Look at the detail. It's like there's nothing there. There's just a whole bunch of scribbles, but they're done in a way where I'm conversing to you something.
Yeah.
And it may be simple, but it's actually deceivingly complicated. It just looks simple, but it's not simple. And that's the sign of really good oratory or poetry or anything like that. Read Emily Dickinson. Well, that, it reads easily, but it's like, holy smokes, that's really complicated and deep. That's what poetry is. Got it?
Yeah. No, it's great. And again, I agree with everything you're saying. So fantastic. There's just a couple of questions, if you're happy to answer quickly, Ray. Haver's asking, how do we adapt character anatomy to wide angles and dynamic shots?
That's a compositional question that gets, that one is really complicated, because you have to always establish, what's the focus. I mean, basically that's it. Don't leave the eye where there's nothing to see. It's like, where do you want, you see yourself as director. Play the part of the director. So all of a sudden you're the director. And what do you want people to see? Where do you want people's heads to turn? That's how you do that. Always know exactly why you're doing something. And make sure that there's a point to it. Don't have somebody look over there if there's nothing to see. So to me, the way to answer that is, focus, what's the focus? And you are the director. And I'm telling you instantly, without question, by looking at these two things, writing them down and remembering them, you're going to be better. The next time you do whatever it is that you're doing, I promise you, you'll be better. You'll answer your own question. I hope that helped.
Yeah, I think it does. And also, when I review a lot of work, people will just put it in front sometimes and say, can you review it? But I usually ask, what do you want me to look at? And sometimes many people don't, they just want you to look at the whole thing without actually having a focus.
That's the wrong answer, because then that means you're not there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, it's like being a great photographer, like Ansel Adams. It's like, well, you never ask, well, Ansel, where do you want me to look at? It's like, no, it's always like, oh my God, it's like, I know exactly where to go. That's what makes somebody masterful, is that you don't ask that question. You know exactly where to look.
And I guess that's where the artist comes in, is their job is to lead the eye, or to that's part of the storytelling, is them creating a composition that does tell that story and creates the focus.
As long as you're patient and know that it doesn't come instantly, and like you said about the 8-week class, and all of a sudden you're a master of like composition. It is basically like being Alfred Hitchcock, and when the train goes through the tunnel, it's like somebody's having sex. You don't have to like make it really, really super clear. That's the one thing I think is lost nowadays, is the subtleties of the human brain, where you don't have to show people having sex. You have to just, the rocket launch or the train going through the tunnel. It's like, I don't know why I got off on this really weird tangent, but I love that kind of filmmaking where, they were so restricted in the past, but it made them clever.
Yeah.
It made them really clever. And I like clever, rather than seeing, some guy's butt that I don't want to see, Harvey Keitel's butt one more time. You know what I mean? So think that way, think clever, and think of, there is always a focus. I don't want to be like, looking at an image like, where am I supposed to look? Because there's so much going on. We're a really good master of composition, and there's many of them, but the one that Dean Cornwell will use in his paintings, and J.C. Leyendecker, but Dean Cornwell is really great. Same thing with Norman Rockwell, all these old, the golden age of illustrators. There's a reason why they're called the golden age, because these guys were all incredibly gifted artists, and they all happen to live at the same time, just about, and kind of overlap each other. But when you look at Dean Cornwell's paintings, there's never any doubt that he's in total control of what your brain sees. That's great composition.
Yeah.
It's like holy smokes, he's making me do something regardless of what my brain is telling me. It's like I'm being led through this image, and that is great composition.
And it's just a couple questions from Jamie. I answered one already, but I'll let you answer as well. The first question was, are there any books you recommend earlier for good muscle origin and insertion points?
Yeah, and I'm going to show this again. The origin and insertion book would be my friend Elliot Goldfinger, because that's been my go-to book for a long time, right in here. The newest book that I was really surprised how much I liked was this one. But Elliot's book is the one I use for when I teach écorché, and écorché is like the 3D version of anatomy. So my students have to build a skeleton, and then they put muscle one at a time. And I have all the muscles that are necessary by page number using Elliot Goldfinger's book. That's origin insertion. This is good for origin insertion. Another friend of mine, John DeMartin, is a good one for like drawing tips. I don't like a lot of how-to draw books. I really don't. I think people have to develop their own how-to by knowledge. Gosh, I was gonna like check these off, but the fact that is I have a list, and this is the list of the books I really like. Valerie Winslow is a fellow Art Center graduate and teacher, used to teach there, and her book is fabulous too. Aldo Zarin's really good, but his books are self-published, are a lot more expensive. But those are it. The first one would be for origin insertion to help her. Just if you only need to get that one book for origin insertion, it also has an action, origin insertion, action, innervation, all that kind of stuff. Elliot's book is fabulous for that. What other questions?
And then the next question from Jamie was, she always sees bones and muscles discussed in anatomy classes. Do you think knowledge of or study of the fact is important?
Yeah, there's a book. Let me see. See this Dr. Paul Richet? There's a book on, now it's on specifically female morphology. My book has some of this. I think it is called that. But remember, Dr. Paul Richet, female morphology. Now, he lived in the 1800s, but incredible. He was a medical doctor and a sculptor, for God's sake. Now, for the person that asked me that, this one right over here, see this? Get this. If you go on Amazon, you could probably get that for like $10. And it talks about, and it's got diagrams of the female fat pads. Elliot Goldfinger's book also has male and female fat pads pages. Oh, I know my books inside out. I'm definitely an expert on this subject. So I highly recommend both of these books by Delavier. The interesting thing is that those are health and fitness books, but because the author happens to be a really, really good artist and knows a lot of anatomy, his drawings are really good. I would say they're about as good as mine when it comes to like the clarity of the anatomy. I would hope that you guys would get my book. Can I just throw out a little plug here? If you were to get my book, no matter where you are in this world, I have international stamps. And of course, I have stamps for the United States. But I have these things called author plates. And they're just a sticker that you peel back on the back. It's got a little tree here. And I would inscribe it to you and send it back to you, obviously free of charge. So if any of you get my book, and it's going to be impossible for me to sign your book because you're not living in Altadena, California, or in anywhere nearby. If you're in Egypt or something, it's like I've sent these all over the world. These little stickers, you peel it back and you stick it on your book, and you have my signature with it inscribed to you personally. So think about that. I could always be found either on Facebook or it's just reybustos@gmail.com. I'm the easiest person to get a hold of. I'm not like Oprah or something like that where she has people. I'm just a guy here in California, so I'm easy to get a hold of. Okay, Jay, take over. Any other questions?
Just one more, which is
Sure.
Tom. Please could you ask Ray to talk about the proportions of the scapula relative to the rib cage to position?
Oh, that's interesting, because I see the rib cage like this. I'm going to get a new image. Let me see. I'm still learning all this like technical stuff. Look at me. Wow. Here's the head. Okay, I'm going to take this head, this shape, right? And I'm going to take it to a copier machine, right? I'm going to put 150%. Right? So what happens when it comes out? It's this big. Does that make sense? I'm going to take that and I'm going to turn it upside down. That's the size of the rib cage. Do you like that?
Yeah, that's a great way of breaking it down.
Yeah, I have like 1,000,001 ways to make it easier. Anywhere between, obviously, there's people there. It's like, how tall is a man, right? It's like, well, what, 6 feet? you know, something like that. But then there's 7-footers and there's 4-footers. So there's a span that basically is between 150 and 200%. Wow. Okay, so here is the scapula. Watch. If I take this, now I use the unit of increment for measuring the human body is the head. I'm just going to put an H as if it was like a international symbol, right? An H is, it's like wherever you're from, there's a denomination of your monetary system that is based on one, right? 1 peso, $1, 1 shekel, 1 stone, whatever it is, right? So in the case of anatomy, we use the denomination of a head, which means, oh, guess what happens? You know, in my pocket, guess what I have? I have 50 cents. I have 2 quarters. 50 cents equals 1, because each one, you know, is like $0.50. Got it? So I have, or it's $0.25. So actually 4 of these equals $1, right? So each one in America is called a quarter because it's a quarter. Okay, that sounds silly. But if you take half of that, that's what this is over here. That's half a head. So this is half a head, this is half a head. Got it? There's a quarter of a head, there's a quarter of a head. The scapula is 3/4 of a head. So knowing that, and I'm looking at that, I'm just eyeballing, then that's the scapula. And the scapula, and you see this rib cage. The rib cage is much smaller than you would think because somebody could be really broad and big, and you think their rib cage is really big. The other thing I have is this. I don't know if you have a analog watch or clock, but that to me says, oh, it's 2:30. You don't even need numbers, do you? But over here, if this clock is saying, oh, what time is that? Oh, it's 9:30. Those are your scapulas. That's it. Okay, so if I put the rib cage in here, that's your scapula. And this is your spine. Got it? So that's the basic gist, because these are the 2 most important parts of your scapula, is the medial border that roughly parallels your spine, and the spine of your scapula, which if you threw your hand over your shoulder, right or left, your fingers would hit what looks like or feels like a shelf. And then here's that rib cage. So the rib cage is about 1.5 to 2 times bigger than the head. The scapula is 3/4 the size of the head. So this is the way I would draw that. So if I were to put another bubble here, that is the pelvic area. And if I would put a dot here, that's a sacral triangle. This is the gluteal cleft. And voila. Any other questions?
None at the minute. Does anyone have any questions before we close for the evening or the morning?
I hope everybody enjoyed this. I did.
Yeah, likewise. No, I thought it was great. I think I probably have too many questions for you, Ray, but I'll have
We'll
to.
just do this again. How's that sound,
Yeah,
Jay?
that sounds great to me. No, it'd be fantastic to have you again. But yeah, I think that's it from the attendees. So again, a huge thanks, Ray, for your time and just for your wealth of knowledge, and also, you know, so many ways or tips to draw the human body. I think I've taken away, you know, heaps today as well myself. So huge thanks for.
Oh, good. Thank you. I really appreciate that you trusted me with this, and I enjoyed it.
That's good to hear. Yeah, thank you again. Oh, hang on. Yeah, Tom's just saying thank you again, Ray, for taking your time today. And Amber as well saying thank you, and Jamie as well. So again, thank you very much, Ray.
You bet.
And thanks everyone for attending. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day, and yeah, we'll see you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Jay.
Bye.